evening, everyone, and welcome to the Morean Art Center, and welcome to the gallery talk panel discussion for our current exhibition, which is Daydreams by the fabulous Sarasota Art Collective, SARTQ. And the exhibition actually has 12 artists in it, and we have 3 of them here tonight to talk about their work. I'm very excited to hear more from them. We have Childers, we have Izzy Stark, and we have Yajaira Urzua-Reyes. You have a beautiful name, probably. Oh, and I'm Amanda Cooper. I'm the curator for the Morean Art Center. And I always like hearing directly from the artist instead of me talking about the work. So first of all, I would like to have one of you talk about, or all of you talk about what SARTQ is. What does the name mean? When did it start? I know it has an interesting history.
Yeah. So SRQ, its name comes actually from the airport code, SRQ. And we were founded in 2008. We currently have 17 active members, but we do have a jury process. We just closed our membership drive. And we went through all the applications. There were about 12 applicants, and we narrowed it down to 7, I believe. But it's the team that worked to select who was going to mesh well with our group.
We are a large group of artists with a wide range of approaches to media, and what's really interesting about our group, for me especially, is it's a multi-generational group. So we're not just limited to painters of a certain generation. We have an expansive quality to us where we have potters, we have ceramicists, we have artists that work within the 3D sculptural means, and we have painters, and we have people who just are all across the board. So it's a really neat opportunity as an artist, because our practice is typically pretty solitary. We get to come together once a month and share ideas, really collaborate, and we come together to create exhibitions as well as do community-driven projects.
Go with that. Well, my next question, and you kind of covered it, Izzy, was what are the benefits of being in an art collective? I know there's some artists that like working alone in a home studio, some are in a studio that has a bunch of artists around them, but a collective is slightly different from that. Is there any other benefits that you see from being part of SRQ in particular,
years in Sarasota getting my high school education, and then I spent 4 years in Miami getting a BFA, and now I'm back in the Sarasota area because I loved it so much. So that's how I got here.
Let's see. Well, let's just say 2009, Christmas 2009. My family had 2 small children, and my husband, we got in the car that they hauled behind us, and came on down. But yeah, it was a 5-year plan that turned into a 1.5-year plan. And oh my gosh, I would not. We're from upstate New York, and it's very special and very lovely in the Hudson Valley. But for me personally, to create here in this climate, in the community I am in, and I just, it's so open to me. It's not as stressful with the weather and just everything. It was just easier to raise children here. It was easier to create art here. And I just felt so open. I'm so grateful to be here and being who I am. And I know my husband feels the same way. He's been able to pursue his dreams as well. So it's been just the best decision ever.
I'm originally from Mexico. I was Calientes, Mexico. But my family moved here in 2001 when I was 6. And when I say here, I mean Sarasota, Florida, and that's where I grew up. So I consider myself a Floridian. I'm very lucky that we moved into an artsy town. And my parents have always been super supportive in my art endeavors. I just love the community in Sarasota. Art Center Sarasota. I remember there was a show and I got a scholarship and I was able to go to State College of Florida for 2 years, and I just took all the art classes I could with the intention to transfer to an art school. But that ended up changing, and I went to the college where I did my thesis, and it was a great learning experience. I really spent a lot of time in the studio, isolated as well, because this was back when, like at the height of COVID, is when I was doing my thesis. So critiques were online. I presented my thesis online. So to find an art community was a very exciting thing.
Thank you for sharing. I'm always curious about that. Let's talk about the exhibition now. So the name of the exhibition is called Daydreams, and normally as the curator here at Morean, I'm planning exhibitions. I come up with the themes and pick out the artist for any given group show. But this one was a little different. This one came to me, Izzy, I think it was you that sent me the email, with a full-on proposal with the title and the theme already set and a great description. It was irresistible. Can you tell me how that came about, or any of you?
So Yajaira and I actually sit on the exhibitions committee with SRQ. So my name was on the email, but brainchild right here. We had a fantastic artist that was a part of the collective that was kind of our predecessor. Her name is Yajaira. She set us up with a really, really nice, convenient way to create proposals, especially as we were learning how to approach galleries and centers. And so shout out to Danny for that, because we wouldn't be in this space without her. But
It's my track. She's in Europe right now, so there's a reason why she left.
yes,
It's an
yeah.
amazing thing. So
She's doing something all of us want to do, which is fly somewhere and wait. So she's wonderful. But going back to my point about our group being so expansive and medium, sometimes we have a hard time fitting into a box, right? And so the way that we kind of mediate that is we have an exhibition that is a little more broad in thought. So initially, we're looking at themes that we're all tapping into already with our work. And we kind of all center around this idea of dreaming and dreamscapes. And I think at a time where there's a lot of noise, this became a really interesting exploration to find peace and to tap into that subconscious part of our brains when we're creating. And I think it came together to be a pretty interesting show that is broad in idea and concept, but it's a breath of fresh air for all of us.
we're individually, we are the shapes, the colors, the drama. There's just a lot there, the history, the sense of time. It's really important in my paintings. And so I looked at a lot of vintage circus stuff. And when I do it, I was like, well, I live in a circus town. So it's not really a bad thing. I don't know. But it wasn't, it kind of came second because it came out of the playground thing for me. And those colors and those shapes. So like playhouses and things like that, those structures. So currently in my studio, if you were there, you can see 7 large paintings of circus tents. Working through it.
Speaking of large too, do you ever work small? Everything I've seen of yours is oh, and this is Lauren's work here. I did not mention that.
Yeah.
It's both were paintings. Everything I've seen of yours is relatively that size.
Yeah, generally those are 48 by 48, and about 48 by 60s are like 47 by 62. I think they're just off, you know, just custom size. In my studio, I do because I represent my galleries and they work some small stuff too. So it's fun for me to work on the big thing and go to like a 12 by 12 and just play around. So I have there are like 4 surface tents actually that are small. I think there's one left actually. It's easier to sell the small ones. So yes, I do big or usually.
Did your work change any? I'm sure it did when you moved to Florida from New York.
So that's a history thing. I went to school when I was in college for art, and then I had my own business, and I did the 20 years of having I had business for 30, but I had 20 years of doing the business. I was a newspaper in the Hudson Valley, is a newspaper in Hudson Valley, my son runs it now. And I ended up running it remotely. I thought I would sell it or do something with it, but I ended up keep running it. And so I didn't do any art until 20 years raising kids and doing that. And now about more than 10 years ago, I out of the clear blue, picked it up, and then it went really fast after that, and I've just been painting ever since. So now you just, a lot of women have that habit. But I really never thought I missed it. But boy, whew, it came back like fast and furious. I mean, I paid my dream now, so it's happened, for a decade, so I don't know.
So Izzy, love to hear about your work. This is Izzy's work, the 2 pieces on the movie left, I guess it is. Singing asleep. What does that have to do with the theme?
Yeah, so within my work itself, to give you background about me as an artist, I'm a queer woman, so I tend to process a lot of my internal dialogues.
You're a what?
I'm a queer woman. Queer.
Oh,
Mhm.
I don't understand.
That's okay. No problem. I tend to process a lot of my internal dialogue about my own identity and my own placement within the world, externally within my art. And that can take multiple routes, but I often use text within my work as a direct form of communication with my artists. Not with my artists, with my audience. Because as an artist, I can understand that maybe an audience isn't super literate or in tune with certain artistic choices that are more abstract, and I really enjoy a shared dialogue with my audience. And I think directly using text as a way to inform offers a moment where they can share dialogue back, right? So that is a motif that's within all of my work. But this work especially was born out of the idea for daydreaming, because in the same vein that I express my identity through my artwork, I also kind of find a lot of peace in understanding where I came from. And so I am fortunate enough to the moments that I reflect to the most when I'm looking for reprieve or looking for a moment of escape is the love of my parents and the visceral memories. Visceral is a negative word, but really important memories of my mom singing me to sleep. And so these two pieces behind me have lyrics from Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Goodnight Sweetheart, two songs my mom used to sing for me as a kid. And so rather than creating a shared dialogue where I'm inviting a response, I just really wanted to show appreciation with those lyrics. And so the shapes themselves, that's a pretty new expression for me.
I thought so, I was gonna see that.
Yeah, jumping.
Is that wood?
Yeah, it's in the F panel that I cut. It's wood panel that I cut.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
But that's fairly new because I was holding to the format of a square canvas for a really long time. And I got tired of that. I think I'm pretty expressive and I can't sit still for very long. And I said, what would happen if I cut things and painted on that? So the shapes themselves have a tie back to my childhood as well. They're supposed to make you think of childhood scribbles. So that's the core behind this work.
Yeah, I like how you talk about your work being text driven, and I know those symbols aren't letters or anything, or the actual shape, but they kind of, they're almost like glyphs that are typed like your own language in the actual shape.
What kind of paint is
clay. I painted like a chocolate mousse. It was like a mousse in a chocolate dish. And I did a painting about fossil fuels, and you had these like dinosaurs that were transforming into like work vehicles. It was very on the nose, and I finished that up when I finished high school, and then I went to my undergrad, and I got into like the muddy waters of the art world and trying to be more serious. And I'm just not a serious person at all. And so I'm going back to that. I'm going back to my representational roots, and I'm going to incorporate text and wordplay in more humorous paintings. And so that's a pretty recent development. I just finished one of those paintings, and I'm hoping to continue to expand upon that series because, you know, in the sense that I enjoy that shared dialogue, people have really good reactions to those paintings. And I like to bring joy, and that's one simple way to do it, through jokes and wordplay. So.
And you also have a workshop coming up here.
Yes, I have a workshop on April 11th. The details will be on your website, as well on my social media too. And yeah, it's going to be wonderful. It's a text-based workshop. I'm asking individuals to bring in a 6-word or an 8-letter word, and we're going to lay that out on grid format, and we're going to have a bunch of fun with different applications of paint. It's going to be very graphic, very Wynwood Walls, Miami graffiti. So it'll be really fun. I'm looking forward to that. So if you're looking for something really fun to do on April 11th, and then maybe come to Morean's Freshly Squeezed that night, you should come on by for that workshop.
And Laura, you have a workshop coming up too.
On March 21st, and it's not going to be like that. But how great, how beautiful differences, and just enjoying listening to the two of you, and I feel like it's so special. This is what's so special about being in the collective, getting to be listened to and kind of be involved a little bit in people's, you know, practices, and very, you know, real person role development. It's exciting. I didn't hear that. Yeah, my workshop is a color workshop, and really going to focus on saturation and value and how to add drama to your paintings in a beautiful way, and it's going to be really fun.
We're going to do Q&A in a second, but is there anything else we didn't cover that you three want to mention or talk about? Or?
Oh, we have an upcoming auction. We're partnering up with AIA, that's the American Institute of Architects, and all of the proceeds will be going to the Boys and Girls Club. The theme of the show is called Reflections, so there will be mirrors, and it's our artists, and we invited other local artists as well to participate, and architects are working with us to create work.
And that event will be on April 25th at Architecture Sarasota. There's going to be live music and food, and we, I think, have a total of 32 artists. So that's, you know, a majority probably at SARTQ, but 32 other local artists. So that's what's up and coming for SARTQ.
That's at 6 p.m.
Yeah, and I think there's some architects also involved with making work.
Oh, and one of you touched on it earlier, but for anyone who's interested in applying, do you have the application period open only certain times, or?
It's an annual application, so once a year we do a membership drive. Those details can be found on our website. I want to say the application is always live. So if you are looking to apply, you're more than welcome to go to our website and apply. We just don't do a new round of membership. At the beginning of the year, we just did one in January. So
So you just select a bunch of
December
artists?
31st every year, and then we decide in January.
Do you have a cap, like we won't take any more than this many artists?
I think there was at least a discussion of what the optimal number for us, you know, where we want to be, and I think it's somewhere between 15 and 20, maybe more towards 20. So we're right in there, which is exciting.
another fun thing, like you discussed about not everyone being from Florida, is Sarasota and the Gulf Coast community, I think, is pretty transient. And some people just can't stay with us for very long. I mean, we had, for instance, Daniel Deiger, who's painting in Europe, which is amazing. So there's always opportunity and reconsideration. And we're always looking for ways to get involved with other local groups similar to AIA. So there's a lot of room for collaboration.
Well, this exhibition, Daydreams, is up through March 26th. So, if anyone wants to come back and see it between now and then. And then on April 11th, like Izzy mentioned, we have our Fresh Squeezed exhibition, which we've now been doing for a decade, and that's our annual emerging artists shows with 8 artists from across the state that will be in there. So, very excited about that. And now I guess we'll open it up to any questions that you guys might have.
So I actually work here, and I have a good direct view from the front desk of this piece, and it's been like really refreshing. I love getting to come in the morning and look at it, and it's a nice opportunity to look more closely. And I didn't notice the text at first. It looked more like the abstract shape language, like the actual form. So I'd like hearing more about that. I'm kind of wondering how the representational work that you talked about before with the puns and transitioning back into that. Do you see like a thread between this sort of work and that kind of work?
I think within those two different veins, the more harsh text, graphical, and my more representational practices, after diving into both of them, I've seen elements that I want to combine. For instance, the painting that I just did, I often, when I'm planning my paintings, will take it into digital software and I will kind of create a collage for reference. And so I can take representational references, you know, photos of things, and I can superimpose text on top of it. And so the newest vein is to paint hazy font type on top of representational work. So there's this cool dialogue of is sometimes I want to go back and revisit a vein of thought, right? But I have to get it out there as fast as possible.
Did you paint this on the board first and then cut it, or
I cut the boards.
and then you painted it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Who's the third?
The third.
Yeah, where is it?
Exactly. That one actually looked a little out of place because that was the first one I did. And I feel like the edges were a little more jagged and it was a little more thin in terms of like line thickness on the shapes. These are a little more uniform and I think it functions better as a diptych.
Do you use a table saw or what kind of saw?
A jigsaw.
A jigsaw. Okay.
And cordless, hand corded jigsaw.
Okay, and you sand it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm very familiar with carpentry, that's why. My dad used to walk in a room, if you turn that around, you didn't paint it, he could tell you what kind of wood that was.
It's funny because in the collective we have Ro, who uses CNC and like crazy machinery to get
That's wood?
that's what get really specific shapes. And as I was making this, I forgot to clamp the wooden panel down, and I was taking a video of myself making it, and I went to saw, and both sawhorses collapsed and fell on the ground.
Oh, no.
And Ro, without hesitation, the next time I saw her, because I posted it on social media because it's funny, she came up to me and grabbed me by the shoulders and she's like, "You weren't wearing eye gear, you were wearing." So, learning lessons, but there's different approaches. If I had access to a CNC machine, this would have been a lot more simple, but I like the physicality of that process.
I love it. It's beautiful.
I love that story. So it's a multi-generational thing. You can't like move the mom and
Yeah.
for me, I've been there. But,
How long y'all been in Florida?
I think since 2000, Christmas.
I've been here for 10 years.
2001, so about 27.
I've been here since 1964. I know, old man. I was a kid when I came here. So I'm pretty much Southern.
Is there any other questions?
I wanted to know, how do you guys know when a piece is finished? Because you can work on it for months,
That's
but how do you know when it's done?
So, that's a common question. I like it actually, because I do work with them for a long time. And I like that they evolve slowly. And I think like that's part of the beauty of painting to me, this kind of painting, is that it does evolve organically, slowly, in very real time. But I think as it evolves, it resolves itself, right? You're constantly doing this. What if I change this? What if this color was bright? What if this color was this? What if this shade was bigger? What if this was a little different? And it's just a constant dance of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And those what ifs start to slow down.
that's a pretty fun question to ask to a panel of very, very different painters, right? We all have very different approaches to that type of practice, and I think that's what's really neat about painting. It's like there is no direct mold or answer. I have an obsessive quality over my work when I'm doing it, and I think that's because of my approach to one piece being my main focus for that time being. I'll finish up in the studio and I have like process photos and I'll have a photo on my phone and I will like lay in bed and look at this painting obsessively till I have a headache and I need to go to sleep. And I think at some point when that obsessive criticism shifts into like, I did that? Like my hands did that? That's when I know like, okay, well, is it informing? Is it informing by design? And am I proud of it? And when I hit that point of I'm being proud of it, that's kind of when I feel like it's at the end point. If it's going on for a long period of time and I see something else I'm now obsessed with, a new idea, I will leave that to rest for a bit and come back to it when I have that interest again.
I mean, there are a million ways to paint. That's what makes painting so yummy.
Yeah.
Yummy. That's why I love painting and I love talking to painters and having these conversations and just like you.
I quit because I get sick of looking at it. You've done it so long, you know. If it looks pretty good, then, you know, just get tired of looking at it and move on to something else.
So with this portrait, I've never quite seen shape language like that with like the extruded silhouettes and like pattern work of making a figure. And I imagine, like for me, I could imagine being very like confused and then frustrated. And you described like a trance-like state where you're exploring these reveries. And I'm just curious, like, did it get frustrating? And did you have to keep going back to a reference or resketching or any kind of like, yeah.
There were points where I did get lost, and it's specifically because like I said, I tone my canvases normally, but this time I didn't. So I sketched it out on pencil, and then I went back and sketched it with paint, which is not typically the way I work. So I felt very restricted in that sense, and there were lots of white spots everywhere. So I had to go back to those areas and really cover those little spots.
there's certain hues that I will strictly use goldens, and then I'll mix some different brands in there, but it took a lot of practice to find out, like, oh, these are the 3 colors that I need from this brand, and this is what I need from here. So in the same sense that it might take a long time to learn how to paint, sometimes you have to mess around with a lot of different providers of the medium that you use before you fall in love with